Hi, this is Dr. Justin Marchegiani here, and today's talk is going to be on genetically modified foods, otherwise known as GMO for short. So there are two kinds of GMOs to keep it simple. We have the pesticide producers and the pesticide drinkers. So let's talk about the producers first. So the early studies actually showed that certain plants that were designed to produce pesticides, they would produce their own. This one pesticide was known as Bt toxin for short. And in the early studies, what happens is the plant's still producing pesticides even when you consume it, and what they're finding is lots of inflammation to the little microvilli that line your small intestine. So picture this, the inside of your intestine right here. We started seeing lots of inflammation around the microvilli here. And that's even shown by research, and you can get pictures of how that looks. And I actually have a blog article on that if you want to see the actual pictures. But again, inflammation of the small intestine is not good, because this is little vacuum cleaners essentially where the nutrients in our tummy get absorbed up, right through here. So you don't want to inflame your stomach, and you don't want to be eating something that's producing toxins. It doesn't make sense. If it's producing toxins that can potentially kill an insect, accumulation-wise, having enough foods over the course of your day, week, month, and year, that's going to have an accumulating effect on you as well. So that's our pesticide producers. Next, we have our pesticide drinkers. So essentially, what a lot of these companies have done, such as Monsanto and DuPont, they have produced plants that are resistant to certain pesticides. The main pesticide is known as Roundup. These plants are known as being Roundup ready. So essentially, remember when you were a kid and maybe your mom made you had to go out in the backyard and do some chores and pull some weeds or spray some weeds. You had to be very careful where you sprayed that weed killer because it was toxic and it could kill other things. So now we have the exact opposite effect. These plants are genetically programmed to be resistant to Roundup, so you can spray everything else and that plant will stay this program to be resistant. So essentially the main ingredient in Roundup is known as glyphosate. So glyphosate works by binding and essentially hugging and grabbing minerals in the soil. Only problem with this is that plants need minerals to produce a full spectrum of nutrients. So what a lot of the GMO studies are finding is these plants are actually lower in nutrients. Mainly just because of the fact that a lot of them are using Roundup, and Roundup's a chelator. It binds up a lot of the minerals, and these plants need minerals to produce nutrients. It's documented that if a plant's deficient in manganese, it's not going to have a full spectrum of vitamin C. And each plant, each mineral has their own accompanying nutrients. So we see that across the board. We're going to see decreased nutrients across the board. Next, these plants are used, and they are essentially a lot of the comparison to hybridization of how plants are typically combined with other plants to find maybe a more stronger or more fertile plant in certain different conditions, or a sweeter fruit, or a more plump and juicy tomato. So what genetic modification has done is instead of using tomatoes, we're actually mixing different species. So species that would never essentially interact with one another, such as jellyfish and other different types of mammals that you would never cross-react with a vegetable or a fruit. So that's the biggest thing, is we have genetic mismatches, things that we would not see in the real world. This is important because one of the big linchpins in the genetic modification argument is the fact, well, hey, this happens naturally, and it doesn't really happen naturally in the same way. And how it really happens is you have essentially this petri dish full of cells, and they're shooting bullets of gold into the plant's tissue. And these gold particles have DNA attached to it, and they also have a vancomycin, or a specific antibiotic marker gene. And they do that so once they spray in the gold, attached to it is the DNA and the antibiotic-resistant gene. Then they can go spray that tissue with antibiotics to see what's left, to see if the implantation actually worked. Because if the DNA actually implanted, then that plant will be resistant to antibiotics. So they can confirm it by spraying the plant with antibiotics afterwards. The only problem is we're getting more antibiotic exposure. That's another problem. And we already know in hospitals today we're seeing lots of MRSA or methicillin-resistant bacteria that are resistant to different types of antibiotics. So that's another problem coming from the GMOs. So again, we have extra pesticides, we have crops that are resistant, so now we're actually spraying more pesticides on top of it. We have a decreased nutrition because the glyphosate or the Roundup chelates or hugs the minerals away from the plant. We have genetic mismatch. We're combining certain genes that would never get combined in real life. We have increased antibiotic exposure. And the last but most important one is a lot of these seeds actually have terminator technology. So many people are talking about the fact that, hey, we need these seeds so our farmers can be more productive at farming, and we can have food in the third world countries that don't typically have good food. Problem is a lot of these seeds have terminator technology. That means you can't save the seeds from one generation to the next. Typically, you could save your seeds, and then you could replant them, and you can do that over and over and over again. So what Monsanto has done, they have genetically programmed these seeds to not last another generation. That means the farmer has to go back to Monsanto, back to DuPont, and ask for more seeds. So it becomes more costly, you become dependent upon pesticides, you're getting decreased nutritional value, you have pesticides being produced, you can't save the seeds, and also one of the biggest things that people are fighting for in regards to legislation is you don't know what is GMO or not, because does not legally have to be labeled. So we have another problem in here with labeling. So if you have a GMO food and it causes you a health issue, maybe an anaphylactic shock, maybe some type of other traumatic health issue, do you really know it was the GMO food that you ate? And if you don't know, how can you go back and maybe have a lawsuit against that company? So we have a decreased amount of accountability on the company's end because they don't want you to know what you ate in case you have a health issue. And we know asthma, autism, all these autoimmune diseases, every chronic degenerative condition you can think of, learning disabilities are all on the rise. And the question is, how much of that has to do with genetically modified food? Well, we don't really know because we can't really chart it. So at the very least, we need to be able to know what's in our food so we can at least stay away from it. And the best alternative now would be to eat high-quality organic food, local, better, stay away from the packaged crap, and you're going to be okay. For more nutrition or health information, feel free to check the box below in the description. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks. Have a great day.